All right, hey everybody. So I messed up last week. I typed my discussion and did not record it, so I'm going back and recording discussion one. My name is Andy McClellan. I teach eighth grade social studies in Mesa, Arizona. It's good to meet you all. Um, so my discussion last week. The way I saw it, at least, the purpose of the Common School movement, in essence, was as follows: the founders and Horace Mann believed schooling should be a common good, open to all, benefiting all, uh, as do clean water, air, and leafy parks. The founders believed that education was the root of a strong society. According to Tyke, people like Thomas Jefferson and Horace Mann uh, convinced people in American society of this belief and to ultimately embrace it as a way for society to progress. Unfortunately, as you dig down deeper, however, you see where problems with that begin to arise and how you can draw parallels from the beginnings of our school system to now. Uh, the people who set it up, white, male, Protestant, and born in the United States. When you have a school system set up like that by men who look like that, uh, whether they're meaning to or not, it sets up a system that unfortunately favors men who look like them and a small group of women and boys and girls who look like them. Um, and it's my opinion, and I would argue is the truth. And in 2023, we're still unfortunately struggling with that in the same system in so many different ways. I think the system was set up on purpose or not to disadvantage so many groups, not just folks of color. And I think we're still seeing that in large ways in 2023. Obviously, students of color. I've only ever taught in uh, schools, low SES schools, and isn't it interesting that those are generally um, large minority schools? Um, we're seeing that with LGBTQ youth. We're seeing that with trans youth. Um, School systems don't benefit those kids. Um, in the education of blacks in the South, Anderson writes, the black leaders adopt the New England classical liberal curriculum so that the subjects taught did not differ from those taught in northern white schools. Um, and I, when we were doing the reading last week, thought more than any other in this reading uh, highlighted the struggles of folks of color post Civil War. Um, I felt like even in a world where people of color were allowed to set up schools, they were often setting them up as closely as possible to already well established and respected white schools. Um, in essence, to make sure that their students were staying up with what the white students were learning, since they were essentially excluded from all parts of society at that point, as much as possible. Certainly in schools. Um, even into the 1960s, my dad was an Air Force brat in the 60s, and didn't go to a public school until 66 off the Air Force base. And he has stories about going to public school for the first time with all the Air Force kids, and the Air Force base was integrated, so they were you know integrated group of friends from the Air Force base, and they faced a lot of blowback from a lot of the students at the school and staff too, because they were this group of kids coming from the Air Force base, you know, hanging out together. So I think that exclusion still continued into 50, 60 years ago. And I think today, the purpose of the school is still common at its best. We still want it to be a common ground for everybody to learn and build up and raise society through knowledge and education. But I say it's best, and I emphasize it because I think many education systems in America uh, have not been at that level for decades, if not a century. Um, so many people and voices have gotten in trying to influence education that I no longer think it's functioning as a common school anymore. Um, as far as contradictions, you just take my junior high that I work at, for instance. You have 1,000 students that are vastly black, Hispanic, Latinx, Native, and majority low income. In that group, there are few there are few who are common ground with those that the school system we work in bends towards monetarily, demographics, etc. My students are not on the same level. Students in other zip codes nearby in their home labs sometimes were monetarily, sometimes all over the valley in Phoenix, Arizona. And I will never fully solve the contradictions of the common school. Um, but what we need to do is ultimately acknowledge that fact, acknowledge our place and our biases, and partner with those who don't have the advantages we do. Move closer to that common that Thomas Jefferson spoke about all those years ago.